And good morning to Nevada Republican Club's Tuesday morning candidates with coffee with the candidates. Sorry, I didn't have enough coffee, obviously. Today it's a special day. First of all, it's our last Zoom meeting, our last Tuesday morning coffee with the candidates. And we have candidate Sunny Bailey for Family Court I, and we are joined by illustrious judges, Eric and Susan Johnson. Susan Johnson is running for re-election for Department 22, and Eric Johnson is running for re-election for District Court 20. So I thought we'd start with Sunny Bailey, who's a candidate for Family Court Judge. Sunny, you want to give us a couple of minutes, a summary of who you are and why you're running?
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Sunny Bailey. I'm running for Family Court Department I. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from the state of Washington, a little tiny town no one's heard of. I went to University of Washington on a scholarship and while helping on the family farm and also in my mom's hair studio. She used to be a hairdresser. After that, I became a prosecutor in the state of Washington for Seattle. And after the birth of my eldest daughter, and I was pregnant with my second daughter, we found out that my eldest daughter was autistic and she became extremely violent to the point where they told us to put her into a home and actually told us to get on with our lives. We couldn't do that to a 5-year-old, obviously. And so instead we looked for programs and we found one here in Vegas through Lobos. It's called Applied Behavioral Analysis. We moved down here in 2004, started over again as a law clerk over the public defender's office, got my daughter the proper programming, 15 years worth of ABA. She went from 250 aggressive episodes per day down to about 1 a month. And we, during that time period, I was actually able to continue with my legal career because of all the support from this wonderful community. And I ended up becoming the hearing officer for the Taxi Cab Authority, the acting labor commissioner, before I was appointed to my current position, which is as a hearing master in juvenile delinquency. In juvenile delinquency, I was actually able to use my skills in autism to create the only diversionary program in the country for youth with autism. And we provide programs and divert them out of the criminal justice system. And I'm running because, first of all, this community has been so amazing to me, and I've been able to achieve all this because of the support from the community, and my daughter is doing so well that I just want to help other families and help other children, especially with autism, and their families to be able to have a better quality of life. So it's all about giving back to the community and helping out other families.
I understand that you are one of the few hearing masters who really has an expertise, but really understands how to deal with autism because of your own child. And you give a lot back to the community of families who are affected by autism. What's some of the advice that you would give to someone with a child with autism who discovers that recently?
Well, number one, we do actually have a great support system here in Nevada. I'm amazed at the number of people you can pick up the phone and reach. I am one of those people that my number's given out when a family has recently received a diagnosis for their child of autism, along with a bunch of other people. Number one, reach out to the community. The community is amazing. You're not alone. And that's what we try to teach people and educate the parents when they come into the juvenile justice system. We really don't want them in our juvenile justice system. We don't want any child there. So it's all about seeking support, support for you, support for your youth, your child with autism, getting the proper treatment, getting the proper IEP. It's a team approach. It takes, we have 24 participants as far as service providers that actually help in autism court. We call it autism court, but it's day court. And that tells you just how much of a struggle each parent has and each youth has and how many different areas we need to address. So my advice is, number one, you're not alone. Any parent with a child with special needs, you're not alone. Please seek out other parents, seek out other support so you have that. It's very isolating to find out that you have a child with special needs, especially one that's violent in class. They're constantly calling you to come pick up the youth, or the school doesn't know how to deal with them. You have a job, you need to keep your job, and you're just trying to juggle all these different things and have a quality of life. The parents who see us, they're so exhausted. We're just trying to let them know that you do have an opportunity to rest and for some self-care, and that when we get you connected with the community, everyone's quality of life will be so much better. So that's kind of, just reach out and ask for help.
Thank you, Sunny. During our interview, and by the way, the club had had engaged in 12 hours straight of interviews with different judges. We were impressed by your conservatism because of your family background. Can you describe that for the
My family
audience?
background. Well, first of all, I think you mean my family history. So I means my parents. I'm the firstborn on my mom's side here in America. So I am the first of what, two siblings and 14 cousins who was born here in America. My mom actually was born in Seoul, but she was raised in Pyongyang until the conflict occurred. And my grandmother took my mom and my aunt and walked from Pyongyang down to Seoul. So my mom has an amazing background as far as my mom and my grandma are two of the toughest people I've ever met to do that during the wintertime, during war and conflict and everything else. And my grandmother had my mom who was only 5. My mom used to tell a lot of stories about what she saw on that walk, but she wouldn't tell us a lot of the details. She would just tell us little bits and pieces. So we had to kind of piece it together. But my mom was so proud of the fact that she made it to America. And then my dad, part of the deal was when they got married is that my mom would bring her siblings down over to America as soon as we could afford it. So every time that we saved up, we had enough to bring her 3 brothers and her sister and their families all over to this little tiny farm town in America. We all lived in the same house for a while. So I've lived with all my cousins. And then my mom would get them on their feet, and then they're all business owners, and we're kind of spread throughout the country. And my cousins are doing extremely well, but we're really close. On my dad's side, it's a little bit different. My great-grandfather and my great-grandmother actually escaped from the Ukraine right before the Bolshevik Revolution. My great-grandfather had been sent to Siberia twice to work in the mines because he was a little bit too vocal, and he was sent without a trial. So my parents were very, very big advocates about how important it was that we had the freedoms here in America to say what we want, to do what we want, because my mom's history, especially even just from the walk and everything else, she had actually also talked about during different occupations of South Korea, how we had actually relatives that disappeared in the middle of the night, both in North Korea and South Korea. So our family history isn't very extensive, but we're very proud of the fact that we're all close to those that are here. Unfortunately, I don't have a family tree like everyone else does. I used to be so jealous of the people who could date back to, the Mayflower and everything else, since we had a limited history. But yeah, that
Well,
is a bit.
well, I think it is telling about your family history because in both sides of the family, they were escaping communism and socialism. So, and I think once you go through such a traumatic experience, I think your family understands the problems with those kind of systems. Um, Going back to your background, how much experience do you have in terms of divorce and divorce law?
Well, I've actually volunteered with legal aid. And so my practice is actually criminal, civil, and then for the last 6 years, I've actually been in family court practicing exclusively under their jurisdiction. And I think one of the things that people forget is they think it might just be divorce, child custody. We also handle abuse and neglect, probate, and we also handle juvenile delinquency, as I said. I've been handling discovery, so I have to be familiar with the family court and the different issues that pop up in order to adequately make those rulings. Also, my background in criminal law actually helped me for when we do our emergency TPO duty, which is the protective orders, because I do understand the dynamics of domestic violence, which weigh quite heavily in family court. I've handled it from a prosecutor, I've handled it as a defense attorney, and I've handled it in my current capacity as well as a hearing master. So while I'm not as versed in family law per se, that I have not done exclusively divorces, I am familiar with the issues that do arise. I also have a heavy trial background experience. I have over 50 jury trials that I've conducted as a lawyer. That doesn't include those that I've presided over as either a pro tem judge or as a hearing master. And in the state of Washington, I was also a pro tem judge, and we had jury trials for everything, whether it be a 6-person jury or a 12-person jury. So I actually presided over cases in civil and in criminal court as a pro tem judge as well.
So, I'm really impressed by your experience as a hearing master. What's your biggest pet peeve when dealing with attorneys when you're a hearing master?
I think I've been very fortunate that everyone has been well prepared and ready to go. It's just hard, and it's not per se against any particular attorney. It's so hard when the attorneys are trying to make it to all the different hearings and then they need to make it to family court as well. So often it would be really difficult for someone to make it from RJC down to family court in our building down on Pecos. With the addition of Blue Jeans, it's been a lot easier for people to pop in and pop out. And so that actually has really helped a lot. But for me, it's just trying to move the calendar along. It's great when everyone's there and we could keep things going, but we understand when it can't happen because there's just so much volume of work to do in the different courts.
Wow, so that's great. I mean, Zoom is actually a big pro. It's a big benefit during this COVID period. Very familiar with Zoom is our two judges, Judge Susan Johnson and Judge Eric Johnson. I was doing some research on both of them, and the amount of experience, legal experience they have is really quite impressive. It's overwhelmingly impressive. Judge Susan Johnson was reelected twice, was actually elected to 2014 and 2008 by 64, almost 65% majority. And Eric Johnson, I'm floored by the fact that you had a top secret clearance for the Joint Terrorism Task Force with law enforcement. Really quite impressive. Judges, I know that you've had quite a bit of experience together. What's your biggest pet peeve when it comes to attorneys?
I'll let you go first.
Okay. Oh boy. By the way, I want to thank my husband. We brought both iPads, and for whatever reason, my iPad is not connecting. I don't know why that is, but by the way, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. I would have to say that my biggest pet peeve is when lawyers are not quite as prepared as I think they should be. And then I will have to agree with our hearing master, Sunny Bailey, that I do appreciate, though, the frustrations of them going from court to court to court. The Blue Jeans system, which is basically Zoom, has helped that. But of course, Blue Jeans has its challenges as well, because the attorneys, some of them don't have as good of a computer system as we do. So sometimes they sound like they're underwater. Sometimes we can't hear them, things of that nature. Also, a pet peeve of mine is that when the attorneys are appearing by Blue Jeans, well, let's just say that their presentation is not always the best. I've had an attorney show up in a bathrobe. I've had attorneys show up, well, in t-shirts, sometimes looking like they just got out of bed, when I think that they need to look professional, have a good background, things like that. Eric, what are your pet peeves? Whoops.
Well, I probably would echo most of those things. I mean, I will agree with hearing master Bailey that the vast majority of people who appear in court actually are pretty prepared. I've been really impressed with the quality of attorneys here since my practice for the most part was over in federal court until I became a state court judge. And I've heard people make remarks regarding the differences in the bar. I haven't seen it. Most of the attorneys are very prepared when I've appeared here, but there are times that they aren't prepared. And there's times where, and also I'm sort of like, really, you're making this argument, and you feel like you're wasting some time with that. But that's probably, and then I echo completely Susan, and it comes to Blue Jeans. I think it is a great tool. I think we're still trying to learn how to use it, especially the bar. I tell people all the time that they need to start thinking, if we are going to end up going with this for an extended period with virtual hearings, they need to start thinking about how they want to set up their cameras and computers and everything so that they make the best presentation. You have people with cameras that are awful, or they're looking up their nose or down their ears, and people really haven't quite got the knack in terms of how they should look professional on there. I've had about the same experiences, and let me tell you, you can make probably a viral YouTube tape of all of the weird things we've seen attorneys and their clients do appearing on Blue Jeans here at the court.
Well, I have to say that as a retired attorney, I appreciate those comments. The one thing that all three of you do have in common is that you are endorsed by law enforcement. And I think that's really important to our community, particularly during this time of unrest. And we've seen protests turn into riots. How do you, during this COVID period, how have you been able to cope with this social distancing, all of you?
Well, I think the Blue Jeans really has done the most of the social distancing and video capabilities. Almost all of our civil hearings are done via Blue Jeans. The civil attorneys and their clients don't appear in court. And then on the criminal side, pretty much all of the in-custodies are handled virtually. Frequently, the DA's office will send over an attorney, or the public defender will send over an attorney, but there was just a couple people in the courtroom and they're in masks, and everything is with the in custody is handled with either their defense attorneys appearing virtually and the defendants appearing by video from Clark County Detention Center. And then the out of custody defendants, generally they appear by Blue Jeans themselves, although sometimes we're getting more and more who are showing up in custody in court, but in person in court. But that's pretty much how, the system has worked, where we rarely have had a lot of people appearing in the courtroom since this has started.
I might note that yesterday I started my first in-hearing bench trials. And so the attorneys are actually, they're at their tables, they're masked up. I have allowed them to be unmasked when they're at the podium, but they're probably 20 feet from everybody. And sometimes you just can't hear. And of course the masks, they screw up with our peripheral vision, things of that nature. But the courthouse has put together 2 courtrooms and reconstructed them to be what they are COVID ready for the criminal cases. We still do have the convention center available to us until the end of the year for civil cases, because that gives us a lot of distance between folks. Also, in the bigger courtrooms and in the courtrooms, they're available for our short trial program. So if we don't have criminal trials going in what we call the COVID-2 courtrooms, then they are they're put in the bigger courtrooms where they can all socially distance. A short trial, as you probably remember, is started in about 2002. And it is dealing with cases that we can take care of within 1 day. It only involves 4 jurors, so we can distance for that. So we are scheduling our trials, and in fact, I just had one settled yesterday that I had scheduled for November 16th. You've got us judges here who are, I say, I'm frothing at the mouth to try and get these trials done. So anyway, I scheduled one. It's settled, and so I've got another one in December, and I'm doing a bench trial right now.
Oh, great. How about you, Sunny?
Things are a little different where we're at. I have a smaller courtroom, and juvenile's been functioning pretty well off Blue Jeans. As far as trials go, I was fortunate enough to be able to have plexiglass placed around my courtroom, because I do have a very small courtroom. So if when we do have the contested hearings, what we've been able to do is not only require the face mask, but we also have face shields. The witness booth is completely plexiglassed in. My bench is plexiglassed, where we have other people contact, as well as in between the counsel's table. Obviously, it's harder for the public defenders with their clients, so that's why we do offer the face shields with the face mask. And then my marshal has been amazing with his Lysol, and he just runs through, and I don't think my courtroom's ever been cleaner in the last 6 years than it has been, because everything is disinfected after everyone. So it's been able to work very well so far. But like I said, mostly we're Blue Jeans. And then as far as, I wasn't sure quite your question, but also because of COVID and everything else, it is more isolating, because so many of us are working from our chambers, shut doors, or we're working from home because we don't want to crowd everybody. And so that's the hardest part. So for me, the hardest part of the social isolation is I'm not able to force my baked goods on everybody. So it's been very frustrating. And I know, and since we've had them in the house, I've had to sacrifice and kind of partake so they're not wasted. So me personally, I would like to find a home for my baked goods, because it's getting a little bit tough here, but the courts are going.
So baking appears to be your hobby, right, Sunny?
Yes, absolutely. Raised on a farm, so of course everybody bakes. and cans, which we don't do as much anymore.
And I understand the Johnsons are marathoners. Is that right?
Yes. I've completed 7 marathons and I think about 40 halves. Although I have to admit, during this past year, I've kind of just been more walking, and we did build a new house, so we've been moving, and then of course we've had the campaign, so we've been a little bit on the busy side. The most that we've been able to do is the 5K Andale run, which we did a virtual run, about 3-4 weeks ago?
Yeah,
something like that.
Latin Bar.
For the Latin Bar Association.
How do you do a virtual run?
Well, they give you a timer, and then you just pick your course. Now, I picked a very hilly course.
Not a time. They give you an app.
Yeah, they give you an app which has a timer on it, and so it shows you're participating, and then you pick your own course. I happen to pick a hilly course, and Eric's is pretty hilly too. So, but we had fun. He made first in his age class. So
That's perfect. So, Sunny, what do you like to bake?
Oh, well, I love baked goods of any kind, but my eldest daughter, the one with autism, she's gluten-free. So my hobby is taking regular recipes and then converting them to gluten-free and then hoping nobody notices. So that's kind of been what we've been doing for a while. And now the Christmas baking season, the holiday cookies have almost started. So, and then I've been forcing a lot of it. My masterpiece has been, I managed to make this like caramel creme brulee pie, and I didn't have anyone to force it on. So luckily, Heidi Almasi, she's my go-to person for force feeding, said she's gluten-free. So I have that. And then there's a person in the probation department that I also give baked goods to that are gluten-free. So they've been very nice to being guinea pigs for all these different recipes, some good, some bad. And thanks, Dawn, for the shout out. She's also had my baked goods. So people will see me force feed them everywhere because I just love doing that. So it's a gluten-free thing, but it's a hobby. And if you ever want to make friends, I found out passing out cookies is a great way to do it because everyone seems to love cookies.
Well, I always ask this question to all of our candidates who do show up on our Zoom, and that is, what is your favorite cuisine?
Are we starting with the Johnsons? We can start with them.
Yeah, we're going to start with the Johnsons.
I'll go first. I probably Italian. I love pasta.
gosh, I have to say I like all food. We are not bakers, but we do like to cook. And like last night I did a shrimp pasta dish, and the night before he did ribs. And so, and of course I'm originally from the South. I was born in Texas, so I really do enjoy Southern cooking, but you have to kind of stay away from all those fried foods. Otherwise I'd be 300 pounds.
And for me, I'm from an Asian household, so we force feed everybody, as my baking attests to. But my favorite's obviously Korean, because that's what I was raised with. Throw kimchi on anything, and I'm there, and anything with bulgogi. So we just took my daughter when she came home from college for a weekend. We took her. The only thing she wanted was her Korean food, so we managed to get her all of her kimchi and her meats from a Korean barbecue. And there's a question from Bob Sullivan as well. So I didn't know if you wanted to.
By the way, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat box so that everyone can see it. Going back to something a little bit more serious, we're having not a rash, but in the news most recently there have been a number of illegal immigrants who are here in the country, and they are committing crimes. And because of the catch and release policy of some of these states and jurisdictions, they're recommitting their crimes or committing the crimes against innocents again. He's asking, how do you feel about the catch and release policy?
You'd probably be the best one for that.
Different jurisdictions. And Judge Johnson is a former U.S. attorney.
Well, the federal government had a policy here in Nevada and generally where it would prosecute people who returned to the United States who had prior violent felonies and who were here undocumented and illegally. I mean, so there's programs like that. As far as with the protests, a large part of that relates to the district attorney's offices in those locations and the decision to prosecute. You do have judges who can let people out on bail, but the decision whether to prosecute somebody and to proceed with a case against someone who engages in violent conduct during any type of event is really up to the district attorney's office. In terms of bail, the issues are always going to be, since bail is not intended to be a punishment, it's got to be whether or not the individual is going to show up in court in the future, or whether they represent a danger to the community. But again, the DA's office has got to prosecute them for you to be asking those two different questions. So it's a really difficult thing from a court perspective, because until the DA's office prosecutes a case, it's not our decision to sentence. Our decision is bail, and those two issues are danger to the community and risk of flight.
And by the way, both Johnsons have split calendars, right? Both criminal and civil.
I do. Susan, actually, for the most part now is, I'll let her say
Well,
what
yeah,
her calendar
I'm
is.
hearing civil and constructional defect cases. I have a specialty docket, and I've been hearing constructional defects for 14 years. I did have a criminal docket for about 3 years when we had several of our judges in 2014 either retire. I'm talking about the ones here in criminal cases, either retire or move up to the appellate courts. And so we were down on having criminal judges here in criminal matters, and I took a docket for about 3 years. Then in 2018, the chief judge wanted to make some decisions in terms of case reassignments. And you want your judges who have specialties to deal with those specialties. And so I took on more of a constructional defect docket. In fact, I took half of the caseload, and then the criminal docket went to judges who had more experience at that point.
Say?
We do things a little bit different. I'm in juveniles, so obviously I have a little bit different of a structure there. What we do is we have detention hearings from everyone who was arrested, and there's certain cases where you're held until you can see a judge, and other cases where they have some discretion based on a point system. What happens is our only discretion is whether or not they're a threat to the community or to themselves. So we deal with a little bit different of a structure there. And so we don't have bail because we're dealing with juveniles and rehabilitative, and we're considered actually civil in nature, even though we follow the criminal rules there. So we don't really have the same policies as downtown. But Bob, you don't have your camera on, so I can't even wave hello. So looking at Bob, he's all dark and muted, which is very rare for Bob.
He probably doesn't have his hair on straight. So, most recently last night, Amy Coney Barrett was sworn in as a justice to the U.S. Supreme Court. A very momentous day for all Republicans, but actually for all Americans. She's a really smart attorney. She's had a very quick rise because she's been brilliant, both on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals and in her personal life and how she conducts herself. There's been a lot of policy talk about court packing. How do you feel about court packing of the U.S. Supreme Court?
I'll let the Johnsons go first.
Thanks, Sonny.
You're welcome. I defer to my bosses.
That's a difficult issue, and that's obviously something that's going to be debated. But we have operated with 9 justices for 150 years. And you have to look at really what you consider the purpose of the court. And if you're making changes in order to institute policy decisions, then arguably that's an issue more of the legislature than anything else. So it's at the same time, judges need to be responsive to changes in society. I mean, you look at, go back to the Great Depression, and there were changes that ultimately were adopted that you can even argue today whether right or wrong, but ultimately adopted that were important to society, has become a part of our common place in our system of social and medical stability. And so you have to make adjustments to that. So it's a balance thing at this point, and that's a legislative decision that legislature will need to make if they want to try to do that, and people need to respond to it if they feel that's appropriate or not appropriate.
I can speak in terms of the Nevada Supreme Court. We've increased it. Whenever I started as a lawyer 35 years ago, we had 3 members of our Supreme Court. That was expanded to 5 and then eventually to 7. And it was expanded because it was a workload issue. And, the terms pack in the court, of course, that does get, that term to me says some things about social policy, but I could tell you that we have increased our judiciary from 3 to 7 because of a workload issue. We've also, of course, expanded now to an appellate division, which, by the way, we were probably the only court in the only state in the country that didn't have an appeals court until just recently. So it's a workload issue in Nevada.
Sunny?
And for me, I've always been fascinated about the makeup of the Supreme Court of the United States, just because it goes back to Marbury versus Madison. And, when you're a nerd in law school and you read about the history of the cases and the dynamics that went through, I think you're always going to find that there's a lot of different aspects of every single appointment, whether it be on the Ninth Circuit, whether it be, in our federal district court, and whether it be on our Supreme Court. I think what's fascinating is what when we watch these justices develop and we watch them embrace different ideas and everything else. And I think that one of the great things that we've seen over the last, at least, couple decades is the amount of diversity that they're seeking to put on the benches. And I think that's extending all the way up to the Supreme Court. So what I'm really eager to see is not so much what we say is going to happen right now. I'd actually like to see what happens as we get to different issues that come before the Supreme Court and the decisions and how they're authored and things like that. And just because, I'm one of these nerds that like to think about things, I think about like Justice Stevens and how he started out one way, but then his decisions expanded as he became more knowledgeable about all the different areas. So I think it's going to be fascinating to just watch as the court continues to develop and the different ideas and the diversity come together and they make decisions. Because I'm always surprised by sometimes some of the writings that come out and some of the decisions that are authored, especially some of the dissents. But I think it's going to all be just kind of playing out as we watch it develop. So as far as everything else, I don't see how anyone can say that all these different factors don't come in play, because they've come in play since the very development of the Supreme Court itself. So it's kind of a history. So it should be interesting.
Should be interesting. Whether they change the 150-year history or so, or actually 200-year history, well, the history of the number of Supreme Court justices. Last question, 7 days till Election Day, 1 week from today. My question to all of you is, have you voted? And how did you vote? And what are you doing for the next 7 days in terms of campaigning?
Sunny.
I'll start. Okay, that one. First of all, of course, voted. What we did is we actually did our ballots and we walked them in. And so we walked them in and then we checked online and showed that they were received, just because the line was so long at that point. And we had some other things happening. My daughter voted for the first time ever. So that was great. She did point out my opponent has never grounded her. So that was an argument I've never had to make for support before. So that was a little unique. As far as the next 7 days, I am taking requests as far as baking, because a lot of baking is going to be happening in this household for the next week, court and everything else.
Okay.
Nope. We did the last Saturday, not actually
Sunday.
2 Saturdays.
It was Sunday.
Was it Sunday? Oh,
It was
okay.
the second day of the early
Second
voting.
day early voting. That's right. So we found a place with no line. Strongly recommend Whitney Senior Center. And everybody was great there. And we got in and out in less than 5 minutes. And, for the next 7 days, just trying to keep doing everything. This has been a difficult campaign. Normally, we'd be at in-person events almost every day these last 2 months. You know, I can think back to 2016, and there were days where I did 5 different events. Now, every now and then I'll do 3 Zoom meetings, but you know, we're just trying to get out and still meet people and talk about my experience and my hopes and goals and aspirations for the court, and try to get more people to vote for me.
And I have to ditto with Eric. We went the second day of early voting, and thankfully on one of those next door Facebook type things, we found out about the Whitney Senior Center, and we both in person voted. I'm not really a fan of the mail-in vote. I just want to make sure my vote is being counted. But in any event, we did vote, and during the next 7 days, we will be doing whatever we can. Luckily, there have been some events that have opened up. We did go to the Las Vegas Metro Best of the Badge Gala the other night. That was actually a lot of fun. I'm enjoying getting out and meeting people. I'm getting tired of the Zoom meetings, but at the same time, they give us a great forum. Like, this is a wonderful forum for us to get to talk to our friends. And so anyway, for the next 7 days, we're going to cross our fingers and probably be anxious, but it is what it is.
And do you have any victory parties planned?
You know, the last, all the elections that I've done, and this is my 4th election, is hunkered down at our house and just had our computers like burning up to try and find out information to see how we're doing. And of course, we have our telephone calls and things like that. But now I'm a little bit nervous about having a victory party when we haven't been victors yet.
Plus, it seems like it's getting later and later for the ballot results to come in. So, I mean, having a party nowadays is like an all-nighter.
And we have to get up early in the work in the morning.
And in the primary, we didn't even get a result till 4 o'clock in the morning. So it made it a little bit harder.
Yeah.
So people are asking whether the Nevada Republican Club will be having a victory party or some kind of party. And the answer is no, because most of us will be working at the polls. I know that I'll be at the elections department once again. I've been there every single day since last Saturday, except for yesterday. A lot going on. So we will not be having a victory party, but we will be having our luncheon on November 10th. By the way, quick survey, how many of you voted in person early? I find that very interesting because Steve Sabellis has said that the Republicans are really doing great in terms of early voting at the polls. There's been a surge of Republicans doing so, and I think that's pretty amazing. Thanks, a lot of people voted. A lot of people are voting today. That's terrific. So this concludes our interview portion of our judges and our judicial candidate, Sunny Bailey. Sunny Bailey, again, is running for Family Court I. I, Sunny Bailey.
Yes.
Remember the I and the Bailey. And of course, Eric Johnson is 20, Department 20, and Susan Johnson is for Department 22. I just wanted to remind everyone, our next luncheon is November 10th. It's a week from today, and we should have most of the results, and we would be very pleased if all of you could join us on November 10th. Win, lose, or draw, we really would love to have all of you at the Ahern Convention Center. We would love to meet our candidates that we have endorsed, or rather recommended: Jim Davis, Judge Trevor Atkin, Judge Rhonda Forsberg, Adam Gans. I'm going through the list. And of course, our candidates, Jason Stoffel. We have others who have joined us. Please join us on November 10th. And then of course, the elections. Don't forget, the Nevada Republican Club is having our elections on November 30th. And we have candidates for president, vice president membership, executive director, four director positions, a director of communications, secretary, and treasurer. I hope all of you will be there as a member to vote on November 30th. Finally, very quick, all of our videos are posted on our YouTube channel. That's Nevada Republican Club YouTube channel. So you can show and share with your friends, your neighbors. And they will be posted, I would say approximately 2 or 3 days after we have our Zoom meeting. If there's nothing else, does anybody else have any other questions for our judges? Nope. I want to say thank you, all of you, for being loyal members of the Nevada Republican Club and for joining us on Zoom. Hope to see you on November 10th. And again, be sure to share our Facebook page and like our Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel. Thank you, Judges Eric and Susan Johnson. And thank you so much, candidate Sunny Bailey. We look forward to hearing great news on November 3rd or November 4th, and definitely on November 10th. See you all soon and have a great day and be safe out there.
And healthy.
Thank you. We'll see you
Stay
soon.
healthy.
Oh.